Hey, y'all, it's Michelle with SLP Full Disclosure. Welcome to the podcast today. We have a beautiful guest with us, Miss Moriah Gilman. Moriah, welcome to the podcast and thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having me. So
Yes.
excited to be here.
Okay, so Moriah is a virtual SLPA in Illinois, and you're
Mhm.
working in Indiana,
Correct.
but you are also the winner of the AMN scholarship,
I
correct?
am.
Yes,
Mhm.
congratulations. That's so
Thank you.
exciting. So, we're going to be talking about that here in just a little while about the scholarship. And we're going to be talking about your work as an SLPA. You're also working on your master's degree. So, Mariah does not have a lot of quiet time to herself. She's busy all the time. I remember those days. I worked full time while I was getting my master's degree, too. So, I
Mhm.
know how hard that is. And I know that you must be very dedicated. So,
You
but
know, you
thank
know the
you.
path.
Yes, thank you so much for joining. Before we get started, I want to read you guys a little bit about Moriah. Moriah is a Chicago native artist and future speech-language pathologist. In 2023, she graduated summa cum laude from Columbia College Chicago with a Bachelor of Arts in Musical Theater. She is a Jim Jacobs Scholarship recipient, TEDx speaker, and is currently represented by Shirley Hamilton Talent Agency. She also holds a Bachelor of Science in Speech and Hearing Science from Arizona State University. At ASU, she oversaw quality control for Babel Boot Camp, an extensive program devoted to treating pediatric cases of classic galactosemia. Moriah is currently pursuing a Master of Science in Speech-Language Pathology from University of Nebraska, Kearney. At UNK, she is a lead graduate research assistant for the Language and Cognition Lab, participating in cognitive health research for aging populations. Recently, Moriah was selected to sit on the Models of Academic and Clinical Education Topic Committee to review submissions for the 2025 ASHA Convention Program. In the future, Moriah hopes to pursue a professional career in theater and open a nonprofit theater company for children with speech impairments. A quote she centers her career journey on is, "Art changes people, and people change the world."
Absolutely.
Wow. So lots of things going on. Tell me about your musical theater background. That's super interesting, and how you went from that to speech pathology.
Yeah, wonderful question. So I grew up performing. I mean, 3rd grade, Mariah was already doing her thing in Seussical the Musical. I remember I was a Who, and that's where it started, and I just fell in love. I tell a lot of people that when I did performing and I went to see musicals, especially as a younger kid, our art just took up a real estate in my soul, and it just became something that I wanted to pursue. So I went forward, and then I pursued a bachelor's in musical theater performance at Columbia College Chicago, but I also have a love and fascination for science. And so I know I'll speak a little bit more to this later with my mom's influence in my career
Uh-huh.
choices, but I remember coming to her and being the theater kid that I was and being the science nerd that I also was. She looked at me and said, "Well, why not both?" And so
Right.
that led to the bachelor's in speech and hearing science and this really desire to use music in therapy. And then moving forward into my master's degree, I've just seen the beauty of the research, even that's coming out more recently, of how music is so influential in language development. So having this bachelor's and extensive background in music, I think, is only going to serve me and the patients that I see moving forward in a really positive light.
Wow, your kids are so lucky to have you as their SLPA.
Oh,
I'm sure
thank
that your
you.
singing voice is much better than mine, even
Oh.
with Old MacDonald or Itsy Bitsy Spider. So, how do you incorporate music into your therapy sessions? Do you have songs that you sing? Do you make them up on the fly? I know we had Kevin Simmons, the singing SLP.
Oh, I
I
love
think
him.
yes. So
Yes,
we
big
had
fan.
him on the podcast, and he said something about he would just make up a beat, and I'm like,
Mhm.
Kevin, do I look like someone who could make up a beat? So, but how do you incorporate music into your therapy sessions?
You know, that's a great question. I love his Instagram channel is actually one that I follow quite extensively just because he has some wonderful tips and tricks when it comes to incorporating music into therapy sessions. I'd love to just share a quick story. I think that illustrates how I use music in
Yes, please.
therapy. So I was working with a client about a year ago. This was when I was still in person at a pediatric private practice, and we'll say her name is Sarah. Sarah came in. She was a 5-year-old. She was nonverbal, diagnosed with about I think stage 3 ASD, autism spectrum disorder. disorder. And so her functional language was basically non-existent. So the first session that I had with her, I walked in and just kind of took some time to observe her as she wandered around the classroom, really unable to functionally interact with peers or engage in any type of communication with me.
Mhm.
But then music entered the picture. I turned on Bluey, of course, because what else would I what else would I
Right.
resort to? And her head whipped around. She made direct eye contact with me and began singing along to that theme song in perfect pitch. So I knew in that moment that music was my way in. And so from that point on, very similar to what you're saying with creating beats, I had taken a lot of what I had learned in that bachelor's in musical theater performance with music theory knowledge and just creating
Mhm.
different rhythm patterns or even different uses of scales and then incorporating that using functional phrases. So even if it was just clapping, that's kind of where I started with her. And then I attached different clapping patterns to functional phrases such as open door or let's go, something, of course, she could begin using in everyday situations. And I will never forget one October morning at 9 a.m. in the morning, she looked me right in the eyes right as we were approaching a door and said, open door. And I,
Oh,
I tell my parents, I don't think there's anybody else that would be crying at 9 a.m. in the morning
right.
over a child saying two words to me, but it was just such proof to me that music really is so impactful and
Mhm.
promoted such naturalistic development of language in Sarah. And I was just so privileged to be able to watch that journey. And her language just continued to soar, which was awesome to see and be a part of.
That is a beautiful story. I think other speech pathologists would cry with you,
Yeah,
because I know what that's like, hearing those kids say that word for the
absolutely.
first time, that
Hmm.
pairing those motor acts with those verbal cues is so important, and that's just a basic language development and that's the stage that I see most people are overlooking now, even with, when that
Hmm.
early language and that early childhood is that motor imitation piece. So, I'm glad you mentioned that. So, all right. So, you are the winner of the AMN scholarship. Tell me how you learned about the scholarship and how you knew to even apply.
Yeah, so I learned about the AMN scholarship honestly through research, independent research. I was looking for as many scholarships as I could find to support my graduate school tuition, as that is a
Mhm.
mountain to climb financially. And so I came across AMN's website and saw it was very easy. I scrolled just down to the bottom of the page, lots of great advertising for it, and submitted my essay and my resume. And then I'd also been in contact with an AMN recruiter. Her name is Julie. She is wonderful. And so she had actually made me aware of the scholarship as well and sent me that link. So once I was in connection with her doing independent research, that kind of led to the application process. And thankfully, again, so grateful, winning as well, which has just been such a wonderful opportunity and honor.
That's great, and when will you be finished with your master's? How much longer
But
do you have?
yeah, 2027. So I've got a minute. I claim that I'm one third a speech pathologist right
There
now.
you go.
Uh
I
huh.
love that. So tell me why you chose speech pathology. I know we talked a little bit about in the intro call about your mom and her medical
Hmm.
background and her influence, but tell me why you chose speech pathology for with music theater and then speech.
Absolutely. I would say there's 3 reasons, I call them my 3 buckets, that I chose
Uh-huh.
speech for my degree and my career in the future. I'd say the first is my mom. She is, as we were talking about, my influence in so many different ways, and I know that's a privilege to be able to say, and so she's in the healthcare field, has been for over 25 years, and so growing up, of course, as many little girls look up to their moms and say, "I wanna be just like you," it was very
Mhm.
similar for me, and so I looked at her and said, "Mom, I want to be a doctor." And she said, I don't know if you want to be a doctor. I think you would be much better suited in the SLP field. And, so thankful for her providing that direction because she's right. And it was really just has been such a perfect career path for me. So she is a huge influence. I think the second bucket for me is I love to tell people when they ask, what is speech language pathology? Because it is
Right.
kind of niche. I get to teach people how to talk back, is what I like to
Mhm.
describe it as.
Yeah.
And what an awesome just description of your career to be able to have. And that ranges from pediatric clients all the way to geriatric populations. And so having that in my back pocket has just been so cool and just
Me
an
too.
amazing thing to be able to say about my career. And then lastly, I will never get bored. And I think as I've pursued my master's further, I've just seen how there are so many opportunities in this field
Mhm.
for growth and for change if you're really feeling like you're needing a change
Right.
of setting. So again, I know that's a privilege to be able to say for a career that I could change from a hospital to a school to being remote. So having that flexibility, I think, has made me just fall in love with the career even more.
Yeah, the diversity.
Mhm.
You could specialize. You could do voice, you could do fluency, you could do the
Mhm.
swallowing, you could do pediatrics, geriatrics, so many different settings. So you're right. It's just endless the things that you can do with a speech pathology degree.
Absolutely. World is your oyster is truly what I
Yeah.
feel.
Yes. How did you become an SLPA? So you knew you wanted to be a speech pathologist, so you said, "Let me
Mhm.
dip my toe in and let me become an SLPA," or how did that come about?
Yeah, great question. So I very similar to what you just said, I would say. I through a wonderful organization, company located in Chicago, Chicago Speech Therapy, huge supporter of them. They offered an associateship program during the time that I had just finished my undergrad. So when I had finished my undergrad, I finished a little bit early, and so before I jumped into the master's end of the pool, I wanted to, as you said, dip my toe into the water of speech, and committing to a master's is just a lot of money and a lot of
Yeah.
time. So
Mhm.
this associateship program that Chicago Speech Therapy offered basically allowed me to be a part of many different classrooms in pediatric therapeutic preschool settings. So I got to work with kiddos that had ASD, autism spectrum disorder, some behavioral disorders as well, and just get exposed to a lot of different pediatric clients. So during that associateship, I approached my supervisor and I said, "This setting is really great to potentially earn my SLPA license. Would you be open to being my supervisor as I also, I'm doing this associateship?" And she said, "Absolutely, I would love to." And they were just such a great team in figuring out an SLP to be able to mentor me. And that SLP is someone that I still consider to be a huge mentor of mine now. Under her, I was able to get my SLPA license. And then from there, I branched off and then went to a different pediatric private practice, worked there for a year, and then now I'm doing remote telehealth therapy.
Wow, that's amazing. I work remote as well, and the
Okay.
number one question I always get is, "Do you ever feel disconnected?" Because 'Cause you're also doing your master's degree virtually.
Mhm.
Correct?
Correct.
So you're working virtually, you're doing your master's, virtually. Do you ever feel disconnected? And how do you build those relationship? I've talked about it on my podcast because I'm very much an introvert. I can tell, Mariah, you are not an introvert. You can speak to anyone and talk to anybody, but I
Well,
am
thank you.
very much an observer, and I will
Mhm.
sit back and I will watch. But I have found working virtually that it has really pushed me outside my comfort zone. So I have to take the initiative and I have to be proactive with building those relationships and forming those
Mm.
connections with the people that I work with. What about you?
Yeah, that is such a great question and something that I think is a daily challenge. I think for my work setting, being that all remote and then also working with kiddos on top of it being remote, I think an idea that I've tried to really live by every day that I open up my computer is I need to treat patients, these kiddos, as humans. That
Mhm.
seems so simple, but I think I want to always establish a sense of humanity and connection before I jump into therapy. So, what that could look like is, "Hey, tell me about your weekend. Tell me about your
Mhm.
day. How are we feeling on a scale of 1 to 10? I noticed that we're maybe a little bit more quiet today. Is there something that's going on?" So, I think just giving them the spotlight for a minute, because I think as therapists, and I've heard a lot of SLPs say this, that to be quiet and just to allow your patient or your client to speak and have the floor is very hard because we aren't in a way going
Mhm.
to school to really be able to talk more in a way. So,
Right. And
so I
sometimes it's hard for SLPs to zip it and just
yeah,
listen. Yeah,
just
it's really
listen.
hard.
So I've
So
really tried, yeah, in a remote setting to really work on that skill and let them have the floor. So I think for work setting, really just living by those two mottos. And then for my master's program, I think with that, if anybody, if anyone's listening to this and considering pursuing a master's online, for me, I've loved it, but it definitely takes personal initiative. I think for my professors, there was actually a moment last semester that I kind of felt was a turning point for me where I looked at Canvas and was like, okay, I could just be a student that skates under the radar and is just a Canvas bubble and is known for my work, but really doesn't foster relationships with my classmates, my cohort, or my professors. Or I could choose to see my professors as the incredible resource that each and every one of
Mhm.
them are. And so there was one professor in particular who I just really admired and appreciated her work in the field. And so I made it my aim to just foster a relationship with her, even if it was just via email. And by the end of that semester, just even the wealth of knowledge that I felt I had gained from her class had grown exponentially. So I
Mhm.
really would say the two things is humanity first, and then secondly, seek out people and
Mhm.
choose to really make that a priority if you're choosing any type of remote schooling or work.
Yeah, and that's what like I said, it has required me to push myself outside my comfort zone
Mhm.
and initiate those conversations just like you said, you're 100%
Absolutely.
right. You're
Mhm.
right. How do you feel like your SLPA experience has helped you in your master's program?
That's a wonderful question. I think SLPA, if anyone is considering getting that license before they jump into a master's program, I would highly encourage that route. I think, first of all, I have noticed financial freedom that comes from pursuing an SLPA license before just jumping into a master's. And what I mean by that is very grateful for my master's program. They are currently working with my SLPA license to help me earn some of those practicum hours for the program and have those be paid. And so,
Wow.
the concept of, I know, so grateful, so grateful. Grad school in general, I think, in any type of therapy setting, and again, a few mentors that I've talked to about this, is just in need of reform because the reality of trying to go to a grad program, take an internship, 8 weeks unpaid, that is very hard to manage for many different people in a lot of
Mhm.
different socioeconomic backgrounds and standings. And so I think the SLPA license just makes grad school a lot more feasible. And for myself, I've just been able to pay as I have gone along, which has been, again, a privilege and a blessing to be able to do. So I think first, financial freedom that comes from an SLPA license, especially if you're able to find that master's program that can work
Yeah.
with that. And then secondly, I think even almost more importantly, you get immediate hands-on patient experience, which I think has been invaluable for me,
Mhm.
just to be able to have that as I'm learning. Because I remember even last semester there was a class that I took very centered on pediatric speech disorders, and there were quite a few kiddos on my caseload that I was able to look at that class and be like, okay, how about I take the cycles approach and I'm going to apply that to Sally's
Mhm.
case? I'm going to take this approach and apply this to Sam's case. And so, having
Mhm.
just a caseload to be able to use as a sounding board for what I'm
Right.
learning, I think is just such an incredible thing to have access to. So, I think those two things have been so instrumental in helping my grad school program not feel so abstract, but rather a
Mhm.
lot more concrete. And this is reality. This is going to be my workplace setting one day. And it's just a lot more tangible to be able to see that in my SLPA journey
Yeah,
as
it's kind of
well.
like it's that on the job training. I
Yeah.
know I've talked before. I remember being in graduate school and semantics, syntax,
Uh-huh.
linguistics, phonetic, and all the words, and you're like trying to keep the words, separate. And then even in my developmental classes, learning about all the different syndromes and what the speech
Mhm.
patterns are like, what the language patterns are like. But until you get out in the field and you have that student and you have that student Sally or you have that little student Joe, that you're like, okay, this student has this syndrome, and I remember, and then you can remember it because you can kind
Mhm.
of you remember it forever. It just makes more
Absolutely.
sense.
And it sticks. It really
Yeah.
does because I think there's only so many simu cases that you can do. There's only so many, as you said, just abstract potential examples that you're given in class. But when you come face to face with a client, especially I think a child, it just brings it to life. And
Yeah.
so, as you said, I have specific clients that I think of when I
Mhm.
think of that disorder or when I think of that specific therapy approach that I used in their session. So, yes, overall, is just as to reiterate what you were saying, invaluable experience.
Yeah. I think there are a lot of misconceptions about
Mhm.
virtual master's programs. So, what would you say the biggest misconception is about master's programs that are done online?
Wow, yeah, that's something that I think I even struggled with when I was
Mhm,
looking at master's programs in general, because I did apply to at least 3 in-person programs, when I was doing the whole grad school application cycle. I think biggest misconception probably would be that they're not legit, they're a
mhm,
scam, they're a waste of money, and I can say, speaking really only for my program, that I'm currently a part of, that is far from the case. I think
mhm,
because they are a remote platform. They are seeking to be even more above reproach, it seems,
mhm.
to make sure that all the T's are crossed, all the I's are dotted, to make sure that you walk out of that program ASHA certified. There's nothing that they could potentially say that you didn't have or didn't experience. So again, very grateful for a group of professors that are very above reproach and making sure that the remote grad program is legit and you're getting what you are paying for.
So do your research. Make sure you're getting into a
Yes.
good program.
Yes, do
Yeah.
your research. I talked to a few members of my cohort. I actually had to go to campus recently for an on campus experience that they did require. And they were just talking about their grad school application cycles and how there are a few programs out there that you just need to read between the lines. Either they
Yeah.
are not ASHA certified or there's just something that's a little bit fishy. So, again, as you said, just do your research and you'll be fine. Seek out SLP mentors where they went to school and really, you'll be able to, I think, separate the good from the bad from that.
That's awesome. I love that. Um, what is something you wish you had known before starting your graduate program? Is there anything you wish you had known?
Oh, man. Yes. Yes. I think 2 things in particular. I think first, I would have wanted to maybe be more in touch with the reality of applying to grad school. I think of
Mhm,
that story, I don't know how accurate it is, but when the professor at Harvard University, that it's freshman orientation, the professor walks into the classroom, or into the orientation, and he looks out at the freshman class and says, "Welcome, valedictorians," because everyone there is driven and is, of that standing when it
mhm.
comes to academics. And so I think when you're applying to grad school, especially SLP grad school, it just tends to attract a very type A, very driven, very academically successful group of people.
Yes.
And so I think just being in touch with that and, being okay with that, because then it's that's not to be in fear of, because then it's okay, that's my reality, that this is going to be competitive, but
Mhm.
what am I going to do to differentiate myself and make myself stand out in this grad pool? So I think for me, I really honed in on my love for art and why I believe that's going to be so instrumental in therapy in the future. And I believe that having that central focus really helped set me apart. And then I would say, secondly, something I wish I would have just led with is more of a mentality switch. I cannot credit myself for this. A mentor said this to me, the fail forward mindset. And so basically, what that mentality is it's challenging you to see failure not as an outcome, but
Mhm.
rather movement. So even if the result in your grad school journey, for example, is not what you wanted, still view that as a movement and change in your career. Because I believe that the greatest death a career or even like a grad school journey can suffer is a slow and stagnant one. The opposite of,
Mhm.
loving the SLP field, loving going to grad school is not hating it, it's indifference. It's just not choosing to do anything. So
Mhm.
if you don't get in the first grad school cycle, which is me, I also will be so
Yeah.
transparent. I did not get in the
Yeah,
first
I
time
didn't
I
either.
applied.
I didn't
I think
either.
that's many SLP
Mhm.
stories, and it's good to just like hear that
Yeah.
reaffirming, feedback. And so if you don't get in the first time, let that be an emotion filled, beautiful mistake. Okay, what can I learn from this, and how can
Mhm.
I move forward? But then to follow that, there's no shame that comes from submitting again, from hitting the refresh button, because if I hadn't tried again, I wouldn't be here. So I
Right.
think that's just proof in the pudding that you really should just keep going, because I'm a firm believer there's a grad school for everyone. And if you want to be an SLP, we need you and we want you.
Yes. Well, Mariah, gosh, if the theater arts doesn't work out, if the speech doesn't work out, you can definitely be a motivational speaker.
Oh, well, thank you so
Unbelievable words of
much.
wisdom. Wow. So incredible. Tell me what would be your ideal theater for children with speech disorders? I know you said that that's kind of
Oh,
one of your goals.
man.
What would that look like? Just
That
draw us a picture.
And man, how much time do you have? I think that that is something that I hold so I could even get emotional speaking about that because I think of just the impact art had on me as somebody who is neurotypical and the privilege that that is. And so to think about how I could see art being used to influence people who potentially don't get access to that stage because of just limitations that often do come from different neurodiagnoses. And so, what
Mhm.
I picture is just a diverse group of kids. I would also love to include different other therapies as well. So, whether that would be PT, OT, even some type of behavioral therapy as well,
Mhm.
working with that. I think collaboration and more opinions in the sense of just more perspectives, I think would be
Right.
so influential to just make this idea soar. What I see specifically for the speech realm is creating scripts that would maybe be tailored toward different disorders, or for example, fluency disorder. Maybe we write a script that is really catered toward a kiddo that's using maybe different therapy techniques that are built in there. For example, slow turtle speech or fast cheetah speech. Maybe that's somehow built into the
Mhm.
script itself. And so having these individual scripts for kids to be able to go through, I think is going to be awesome because they're not only working on therapy and helping to improve their overall speech in general, then they're able to do a performance and to do something that they can take pride in. And I also
Mhm.
think parents, that's often a side of the table. We're
Mhm.
so focused on kiddos and of course parent counseling is many times built in, but I think parents are often forgotten as somebody that is a
Right.
part of the joy of the therapy journey. It's not
Mhm.
just about a child's success, it's how that child's success is also impacting the family unit at home.
Right.
So, having a family being able to sit in an audience or maybe even just sit in a room and watch their child perform something and see
Yeah.
the joy that comes from that, I think will just be so life-giving for so many different families. So, I guess in a nutshell, I'll cut myself off there, but that is what I see is just lots of joy, lots of experimenting and trying new
Mhm.
things, and then just lots of success for multiple people involved in the speech therapy journey.
I love that. I can't wait. You're gonna do it. I have no doubt that you're gonna do it, and
Well,
we're gonna
thank
have you
you.
back on when you have this, and it's gonna be amazing and beautiful, and I just can't wait.
I truly
So,
appreciate the support. Thank you.
one last question, and I always ask my guests this question. What advice do you have for people who are maybe on your same journey, working, pursuing a master's degree
Mhm.
simultaneously, or just people who might be considering speech as a profession? What advice do you have for them?
I love that. I think 3 quick things I would say. The first, I would say, especially for those beginning the grad school journey process who are just at the beginning, I think a quote, again, cannot say that this was myself generated, but expectations without communication is premeditated resentment. And so what do I mean by that? It's expectations that I'm creating maybe even toward myself. Well, I'm going to go to that master's program. Well, I'm
Mhm,
going to be that type of SLP,
mhm.
without communicating to myself, without being honest with where I'm at, is only going to generate some premeditated resentment toward myself, even if I don't get into that grad school program.
Right.
If I decide I'm not going to become a medical SLP. So just being honest and leading with that about creating maybe a tangible steps. Okay, this is a grad school program I do want to get into. What are the requirements that I'm going to need to have to be able to be successful there? What's the backup plan? How would I change trajectory if that doesn't work out? So that would be my first piece of advice. That boils down to be honest with yourself and what you really want, because I really think having clarity on that side will just
Mhm.
help you in the future. I think the last 2 things remain teachable. I think
Right.
something that I would say is the rooms that I still remember are the rooms that I felt the most unqualified to be in.
Mhm.
So really make sure that you are always surrounding yourself with mentors. Be picky with who you decide to let mentor you because you will become like the SLPs that you surround yourself with.
Mhm.
And then
Yeah.
lastly, I would say small wins are still wins. I think that that is my motto of 2025. If anyone else wants to join me in that, because as you know, unfortunately, I think. Well, not unfortunately, but many people in this field are very type A. And so I think the
Mhm.
mountaintop experiences are the only ones that we celebrate. I finished my CF year, I passed the praxis, all of those things.
Right.
But how about the fact that you finished your third semester of grad school? How about the fact
Right.
that you passed that comp test? All of these things that are steps along the way to get to the milestones. So I
Right.
would just say celebrate the little things because that is just what's going to keep you going and keep fuel in your tank to be able to be the best SLP that you can be.
Wow. Mariah, it has been absolutely amazing talking to you.
Oh, thank
You are
you.
I
Likewise.
mean, you just have such an amazing sense and amazing spirit about you, and it
Oh,
has
you are
just
too
been
kind.
unbelievable having you here today.
Thank you.
Um, I can't wait to see where you go. You're gonna
Oh,
do amazing, amazing things, and I have a feeling we're gonna have you back on in a few years, and you're gonna have that clinic that's gonna be incorporating art and music and theater and all of the things into your speech language pathology career.
I
So
can't wait. Thank you so much.
I wish you nothing but the best. Guys, thank you so much for listening to the podcast today. It's been great. If you guys have any specific questions for Mariah, I'm sure that we can get you in touch with her.
Absolutely.
But until next time, we'll see you guys later. Thank you for tuning in to SLP Full Disclosure. You can learn more about this episode and our show on our website at amnhealthcare.com. If you enjoyed this episode, share it with a friend and subscribe to our show on your favorite podcast platform. You can also find show updates and SLP opportunities on our Instagram at AMN Allied. Special thanks to AMN Healthcare for making this show possible. See y'all next time.